Good afternoon, everyone. And the first item of business today is portfolio questions. And we'll go to question 1, Dave Thompson.
To ask the Scottish Government how it supports Gaelic further and higher education.
Minister Alistair Allen.
The Scottish Government is committed to supporting all levels of Gaelic education. We understand the value that further and higher education sectors bring to Gaelic and are working closely with the Funding Council and these sectors to deliver high-quality courses, including areas such as teacher training and research, which benefit the whole of Scotland.
Thank you. Dave Thompson.
I thank the Minister for his reply. He will know that Solmarostig has been a great success since its founding 40 years ago. And the latest development of the Gaelic College and a new village at Kilbeg, helped with substantial funding from the Scottish Government, will continue that progress and confirms the Government's support for Gaelic in that respect. But does the Minister agree that the case for Gaelic further and higher education is now indisputable, and will he continue to support Solmarostig, the jewel in the crown of Gaelic education?
Minister.
Well, certainly I do wholeheartedly agree with the member, not just about Solmarostig, but about the recent developments there, and I would certainly recognise the value of that development at Kilbeg. But also the Government recognises too that the role of ERDF, HIE, the Scottish Funding Council and Highland Council have had in ensuring that that success has come to pass.
Thank you. Liz Smith.
Minister, to say how many teacher training places will be available in the Gaelic medium for session 2013-14.
Minister.
I do know that there's an additional 20 hoped for this session, and that the numbers who have been coming through as Gaelic medium qualified teachers this year has been at a higher level than previous years. But I will certainly get figures in writing to the member.
Thank you very much. Question 2, Anne McTaggart.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what additional support it will provide to Parliament Young Offenders Institution and Education Scotland following the decision to increase access, quality and consistency of teaching for inmates as a result of the report on HMYOI, Pullman in February 2013.
Minister Alistair Allen.
The Scottish Prison Service has already committed substantial resources to supporting the young people in Polmont in partnership with Education Scotland. The Scottish Prison Service is now working to ensure that these resources are being invested appropriately to support the changes needed to create the skills development and learning environment envisaged in Her Majesty's Inspector of Prisons' recent report. However, further funding has also been made available for additional posts in Polmont, including the appointment of a project manager to work with both Polmont and Education Scotland to manage the delivery of this groundbreaking work.
Anne McTaggart.
Thank the Minister for that response. I was encouraged to learn that on the 8th of May, Education Scotland and the Scottish Prison Service met with various organisations, including colleges of further education, to discuss the process which will enable Polmont Young Offenders Institution to provide a secure and effective learning environment. Can the Minister tell me what tangible steps have been taken to implement this new initiative, and what difference the current young offenders should be able to identify in the quality and the scope of their education?
Minister.
Well, as the member mentions, on the 8th of May, Education Scotland held a workshop around these issues, and in terms of tangible benefits, I know that the ongoing contract with Carnegie College is certainly something that the college continues to review and expand. I particularly hope that the review that's ongoing of the curriculum that's on offer in the prison will ensure that particularly we pick up early on issues around numeracy and literacy, which are so crucial to ensuring the life chances of prisoners when they come out of prison.
Thank you. Question 3, Colin Beattie.
To ask the Scottish Government what it is doing to encourage over 25s who are unemployed to pursue further education.
Cabinet Secretary Michael Russell.
Presiding Officer, our commitment to a consistent level in college funding of £522 million a year this year and next makes clear our commitment to learners. The current economic circumstances mean it is right to ask colleges to prioritise young people. However, colleges do offer very valuable support to older learners, some 21 million hours of learning in 2011-12. In recognition of the important role they play, our additional funding for next year includes a further 6.6 million additional learner places and 1.9 million for additional childcare support.
Thank you. Colin Beattie.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for his response. Will the Cabinet Secretary join me in welcoming the latest employment statistics showing headline employment rising by 54,000 in the three-month period, January to March 2013? And does he believe that the biggest risk to rising employment is Westminster?
Secretary.
I think that Westminster, or as a member of the opposition just called it Westmonster, and I think it's a very interesting way of looking at it, certainly that is a considerable problem, and the right way for Scotland to move forward is as an independent country, which will be able to offer a consistent and considerable set of opportunities to older and younger learners. It is vitally important that the college sector continues to ensure that its offerings are wide and widely accessible, and the changes taking place through the Post-16 Reform Bill will also guarantee that.
Okay. Neil Findlay.
One of the ways to help over 25s who are out of work is through adult learning. Can I ask the Minister, has the Scottish Government joined every country in sub-Saharan Africa in signing up to the International Adult Learners Charter? And if not, why not?
No matter what the Scottish Government did, there would be some point in which it was not doing that Mr Findlay would regard as near fatal. I am absolutely certain that the record of the Scottish Government in adult learning is good and consistent. And no matter what Mr Findlay waives, no matter the criticism Mr Findlay finds, no matter the inability of Mr Findlay to work with others, the reality is that in adult learning, in college learning, in university learning, in school learning, this Government is delivering good education in Scotland, as opposed to Mr Findlay, who is only delivering constant oppositionalism.
Thank you very much. Question 4, John Finney.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what flexibility there is in the curriculum for excellence to reflect evolving situations in society.
Minister Alistair Allen.
There are provisions within the range of experiences and outcomes that take account and actively promote the study of changing society at a range of macro and micro levels, both nationally and internationally. This is one of the ways the new curriculum is responsive to change.
John Finney.
Thank you. I thank the Minister for that response. The Parliament's Equal Opportunities Committee will shortly be scrutinising the same-sex marriage legislation. What assurances can the Minister give that this issue will be dealt with in an age-appropriate, non-partisan way within Scotland's schools, please?
Minister.
Well, teachers obviously already have an obligation to deal with sensitive issues like this in a way that is entirely respecting of an equalities agenda and entirely respecting of age-appropriate materials. So I have no doubt that the profession will continue to act with that good sense.
Thank you. Question 5 from Mark MacDonald has not been lodged. I think we can all understand why. Question 6 from Richard Simpson also has not been lodged, and similarly we can understand why, and an explanation has been provided. Question 7 now, John Pentland.
To ask the Scottish Government how many further education students with learning difficulties have taken up supported employment after completing their course in each of the last 3 years.
And Secretary Mike Russell.
Presiding Officer, information on leaving destinations of further education students is not currently collected. However, we want to ensure that disabled people with the right support are able to find fulfilling jobs suitable to their skills and experience. We are currently working with the Scottish Consortium for Learning Disability and Enable to develop a programme building on the success of their project search and transitions into employment programmes in order to increase the number of students with learning disabilities moving from our colleges into employment by 200 per year. We are also working closely with local authorities and the Scottish Union for Supported Employment to promote supported employment opportunities where disabled people can learn on the job with support from colleagues and a job coach.
Okay, John Pentland.
Can I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer? Well, a kind of answer, because again, they failed to answer the question with any figures. However, will the Learning Disability Strategy, whose launch I understand has now been put back a couple of weeks to June the 13th, make more supported employment available for people with learning disabilities after leaving college? And will there be measures in that strategy to address this?
As I said to the member, We are currently working with the Scottish Consortium for Learning Disability and Enable to develop a programme building on the success of their project Search and Transition into Employment programmes in order to increase the number of students with learning disabilities moving from our colleges into employment by 200 a year. So there is a number attached to that. There are existing projects attached to that. There are bodies attached to that. Now, I've met with these bodies on 2 occasions recently. I continue to meet with them on a regular basis. I continue to talk to them about what more we can do to support their work. That is a positive set of discussions, and I have been to the cross-party group on learning disability and had conversations with that group to make sure that there is a satisfaction with what is taking place. And if the member wants to come and see me about this matter, we can also have those conversations, because all those things are actually happening.
Thank you. Claire Adamson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can the Cabinet Secretary outline how the recently launched Certificate of Work Readiness will help more young people into employment?
Cabinet Secretary.
Indeed, the Certificate for Work Readiness is a very positive step forward. It's an employer-assessed work-based qualification to help young people prove that they are ready for work. Young people like 17-year-old Fife teenager Nico Hutchison, who after completing the Certificate for Work Readiness with a local electronics firm, then secured a 2-year apprenticeship with the company. Numerous employer surveys show that one of the biggest barriers facing young people in today's challenging labour market is lack of experience. With its employer-assessed work experience placement, the certificate is a meaningful qualification which employers recognise and trust. Successful completion gives young people the chance to prove they have the skills and experience that employers want. That is a very useful and positive step forward, not just for the system, but for each young person.
Thank you. Question 8, Kenneth Gibson.
To ask the Scottish Government what criteria are used when selecting set Scottish texts for the new national qualifications for English.
Minister Alistair Allen.
The responsibility for the development of the new qualifications, including the implementation of a specific element on Scottish texts in the English courses, lies with the Scottish Qualifications Authority. In determining the list of set Scottish texts, SQA took account of the extensive feedback received through engagement with teachers and lecturers, as well as other stakeholder groups. A central consideration was the suitability of text for assessment purposes. Further consideration was also given to ensuring that Scotland's rich culture and heritage, a range of geographical locations and time periods and a breadth of themes were represented.
I thank the Minister for his reply. In the past, texts in higher English included such classics as Ivanhoe by Sir Walter Scott, The Poem of Miss Jean Brodie by Muriel Spark, and Robert Louis Stevenson's The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Are there any plans to broaden the choice of text to include such works which, although challenging, were once commonly used in our schools?
Minister.
Well, I should perhaps say firstly that despite some press speculation, I didn't set the exam questions personally. The SQA do that for good reasons. But it should be said, the member mentions Robert Louis Stevenson, who actually is on the list, although not with Jekyll and Hyde, but is on the list of set text. The other thing that's important to say, however, is that this is one question in the new exams. The option exists for people to answer any of the other questions for the critical essay, for instance, or the internal assessment on any text, be that a Scottish text or a text from anywhere around the world. So there certainly exists the opportunity, if teachers are willing, to teach these and examine these texts that the member refers to.
Hugh Henry.
Thank you. Can the Minister explain why a specified text has been reintroduced when it was previously discarded as being too narrow an assessment?
Minister.
Well, it's being introduced in the exam papers, firstly because the Scottish Studies Working Group thought it was rather unusual that any country would not think it was a normal thing to do for their national literature to feature as of course in a literature exam, as it does in Wales, as it does in Ireland, as it does in America, and as it does by default because it doesn't need to be specified in England. So I think with the advice of people like the Makar, our national poet, and many others, it was felt to be an uncontroversial thing to do, except in some paranoid circles.
Thank you. Question 9, Claire Baker.
To ask the Scottish Government what progress is being made with the Educational Psychologists Workforce Planning Group.
Cabinet Secretary Mike Russell.
The Educational Psychologist Workforce Planning Group met on the 8th of March this year following a meeting on 25th October last year. We are currently working with the group to monitor the impact of the changes in funding arrangements for the training of educational psychologists in Scotland. The group has worked to revise its terms of reference and will meet again on the 12th of September. Full minutes and agendas can be provided to the member and to others who are interested.
Mayor Baker.
In evidence to the Education Committee yesterday, Caroline Brown from ASPEC described significant cuts in education psychologists in the last 3 years as taking us back to square one. Under previous administrations, we saw an increase, but under this government, we have seen a decline. Is the Cabinet Secretary satisfied that the current number of educational psychologists is sufficient to meet demand, considering we are now practically back to the staffing levels of 2001 when the Curry report was published?
Cabinet Secretary.
There is no end to the spending demands of the Labour opposition. Yesterday, in addition to that demands made today, yesterday Mr Finlay was calling for free entry to Dynamic Earth. There is nothing that really will not be demanded of this administration. Now, of course, there are restrictions on public finance. And those restrictions on public finance will have some effect. But there is a new agreed funding position with the Student Awards Agency Scotland that students are eligible to apply for the £3,400 postgraduate tuition fee loan for each of the 2 years, which they won't start repaying until their employment and earning over the threshold. An alternative funding mechanism is the Professional Career Development Loan. That's a deferred payment bank loan to help pay for vocational training leading to employment in the UK and EU. The loan can cover up to 2 years of learning, can be between £300 and £10,000. Students have to start paying that money back once they finish their course. Of course, there are difficulties within the current public finances. If the member really wishes to make a difference to that, can I commend to her supporting independence when all the resources of Scotland will be available to the people of Scotland? That's the way forward.
Neil Finlay.
Presiding Officer, I wonder if you could give some guidance on when a minister answers a question, because in one answer he has deliberately misled this Parliament twice. One,
take it this the point of order, then.
Yes, well, a point of order, whatever you want to take it, Presiding Officer. First of all, I did not say that yesterday, and I hope the Minister will withdraw what he alleges I did. And secondly, the point that Claire Baker was making was evidence presented to the Education Committee yesterday, and maybe he would reflect on that as well and apologise to Ms Baker.
Thank you. I do not believe that's a point of order because, as you will well know by now, questions and answers from government ministers and questions to ministers are a matter for them. So it's not a point of order. We'll now move on to question 10. Bob Doris.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government how it seeks to support vulnerable children and their families.
Mr Eileen Campbell.
The Scottish Government wants Scotland to be the best place to grow up for all its children and young people. We have a range of measures in place to take this ambitious vision forward, and these are underpinned by the Getting It Right for Every Child GIRFEC approach, which has been in place since 2004. This puts the child at the centre of services and focuses on improving their lives through appropriate, proportionate and timely measures. A recently published Children and Young People Bill will underpin new ways of working and embed key elements of the GIRFEC approach into law. The Scottish Government wants to ensure that no parent or family ever feels isolated and can access information, advice and support whenever is needed. Last year, we published Scotland's first national parenting strategy to ensure that parents get the support they need when they need it, and that's supported by an £18 million investment to create high-quality, coordinated and accessible family support.
Bob Doris.
Presiding Officer, could I thank the Minister for that detailed answer. Yesterday I met with families from across Scotland who are benefiting from the Family Fund's Take a Break initiative. This gives families of disabled youngsters financial assistance to plan a holiday of their choice, something which under-pressure families value greatly, and the Scottish Government's support for this initiative is very welcome. Can I ask the Minister to confirm that this fund includes supporting families of disabled children over the age of 18. However, can I also ask if the Minister will continue to work constructively with the Family Fund to ensure there is sufficient provision for the needs of families of young people over the age of 18 to be met?
Thank you. The member raises a very good point, and we acknowledge the importance of supporting young people in this way, and that's why the Scottish Government has put in £30 million over 2010 to 15 into the voluntary sector for short breaks. Now, £8 million of that is directed towards supporting disabled children and young people and their parent carers, and that investment is administered through two funding programmes. The Shared Care Scotland administers £1.8 million per year through the Better Breaks programme, and the Family Fund administers £700,000 per year through the Take a Break programme. Both offer creative short break opportunities for disabled young people, and both encompass young people up to the age of 20, which I know the member will be reassured by. If groups want to re-examine the age limits, that's entirely appropriate for them to do so, and they should discuss this with the Scottish Government. Of course, we'll always aim to continue constructive dialogue with whatever groups are supporting vulnerable young people.
Thank you. Neil Bibby.
In terms of supporting vulnerable children, what is the Minister's view of the reduction in classroom assistance we are seeing in our schools, and what impact does she believe this will have on vulnerable children?
Well, as outlined, we have structures in place, getting it right for every child. Our whole approach in government is to make sure that children who need help and support get that help and support in a timely way. The government is motivated by that, and it's a real pity that perhaps the member doesn't take cognizance of that fact and instead wants to snipe from the sidelines.
Thank you. Question 11, Roderick Campbell.
To ask the Scottish Government what guidance it provides to local authorities in relation to providing partnership funding for nursery places.
Minister Aileen Campbell.
The Scottish Government does not currently provide guidance on this. It is for local authorities to decide an appropriate level to pay partner providers. The key priority is to secure high-quality early learning and childcare for children. New statutory guidance will be published to support implementation of the early learning and childcare proposals in the Children and Young People Bill. A subgroup of the Early Years Task Force has been established to draft that guidance. This group includes representatives of private and third sector partner providers, including National Day Nurseries Association and the Care and Learning Alliance, and Parenting Across Scotland, which supports and represents parents' issues.
Aileen Campbell. Roderick Campbell. Forgive me.
I thank the Minister for her answer. Many parents in my constituency have raised concerns they are unable to send their children to their preferred nursery due to a lack of partnership-funded places, and dispute the local authorities' claim that there are sufficient places in their nurseries in the local area. I welcome the Minister's comments, however, and does the Minister agree that parental choice remains of fundamental importance and that local authorities should take account of this and ensure that there are sufficient partnership-funded places available in local nurseries?
Minister.
And I take on board what Rod Campbell, no relation, has stated, and I am happy to meet with him aside from this to explain some of the proposals around the bill, if he so wishes. And I do agree that parental choice is important, and that's why we're introducing more flexibility through the Children and Young People Bill's early learning and childcare legislative proposals. It is for local authorities to secure sufficient provision through their own services and through partner providers. Now, the legislation will introduce a requirement on local authorities to consult with locally representative populations of parents of children under school age to identify patterns of hours that best suit parental needs, and to respond to those views through local plans to reconfigure services to meet those needs. And that's why the bill is so important. It's about giving flexibility to parents and also meeting children's developmental needs.
Neil Bibby, briefly.
Can I ask the Scottish Government given assurance that the preschool education grant will continue to be given for early learning? Will grants for childcare be funded in addition to the preschool education grant?
Minister.
Again, I'm happy to meet with any member who wants to raise issues around the specific elements within the bill that we seek, and to make sure that we do deliver something that's meaningful for children and young people of all ages. We're particularly interested in the early years childcare issues and want to make sure that that delivers for the developmental needs of children in Scotland. And if Neil Bibby wants to meet to discuss some of those issues, I'm more than happy to take through some of the detail and talk through that with him.
Question 12, Neil Findlay.
To ask the Scottish Government whether concerns have been expressed about the new materials that have been provided to teachers to support the new national qualifications.
Minister Alistair Allen.
Education Scotland worked closely with directors of education and others to develop a strong, comprehensive package of course materials for all 95 National 4 and National 5 courses. Over 15,000 practitioners have accessed the material to date. Thus far, the total number of teachers who have expressed any concerns over the content to Education Scotland is 2. The course materials are exemplars, and the very flexibility of Curriculum for Excellence means that there is no one set course. Teachers are free to use these materials, draw from them and adapt them for their own local contexts, or indeed develop their own courses.
Neil Findlay.
Thanks. At briefings with ministers and civil servants, we were assured that all teachers now had well-developed resources and materials and that they were now all tooled up for teaching all phases of the curriculum. But now we have reports from the teaching unions and others that in some subjects such as maths and science and the sciences, teachers are complaining that what they have received is unsatisfactory. What is the Scottish Government doing to speak to teachers and the teaching unions about these concerns?
Minister.
Well, certainly the Government takes very seriously the need to engage with teachers, and we recognise the need for teachers to be satisfied with the materials that they have. It should be said that the EIS did overall welcome the materials being issued, particularly the fact that on the 30th of April the final assessment support papers went out. And of course we've also produced sample exam papers, or the SQA have produced sample exam papers, as well as Education Scotland's professional focus papers. There's been 150 events around the country where Education Scotland and other agencies have sought the views of teachers, and the Government and Education Scotland always stand ready to make sure that teachers are satisfied about the new exams. But it must be stressed, as I mentioned, that the materials being provided are exemplars, and one of the purposes, of course, of Curriculum for Excellence is to allow teachers the freedom to teach in the way that they see best fitted to achieving the ends that we all share.
George Adam.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Will the Minister join me in welcoming comments from former HMIE Chief Inspector Graham Donaldson, who told the Times Educational Supplement Scotland, "We in Scotland are in a strong position internationally. Curriculum for Excellence, I am quite clear, is the right agenda."
Minister.
Well, yes, I certainly do welcome those comments, and I welcome the fact that there is international interest in Curriculum for Excellence and in what's happening in Scotland's schools. I feel that the Curriculum for Excellence is becoming what happens in Scotland's schools. It's no longer merely a theory, and I think that we can all do a great deal to work together to ensure that both nationally and internationally further positive interest is taken in what we're doing.
Thank you. Question 13, Bill Kidd.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what its position is on the provision of outdoor sports facilities with all-weather surfaces in the grounds of secondary schools.
Minister Alistair Allen.
The School Premises General Requirements and Standards Scotland's Regulations 1967 prescribe a minimum area of playing fields that local authorities must provide at a secondary school, dependent on the number of pupils. Whilst I understand the benefits that all-weather surfaces can provide, it is of course a decision for individual local authorities to take on whether to provide all-weather surfaces as part of the playing fields.
Thank you. I thank the Minister for his reply. Can I ask if he agrees with me that the situation in my constituency of Glasgow Annie's Land regarding the lack of provision of all-weather surfaces at all three local authority secondary schools, Knightswood Secondary, St Thomas Aquinas and Drumchapel High, is an outdated situation for our young people to find themselves landed with, even although two of these schools were built under the previous administration's PFI PPP system? Is he in a position to suggest how this situation may be addressed in order to improve this scenario?
Minister.
Well, the member will, of course, appreciate that I can't speak for the local authority, and I'm unaware of the precise condition of provision of all-weather surfaces at these schools. However, having said that it's for local authorities, obviously the Government and Sports Scotland have been active nationally in these areas, and Sports Scotland are providing local authorities who have committed to delivering the PE target with a share of an additional £3.4 million over 2012-13 and 2013-14 to invest in physical education more generally.
Thank you. Questions 14 and 15 in the name of Liam MacArthur and Joan McAlpine have not been lodged, and explanations have, however, been provided. Question 16, Ian Gray.
To ask the Scottish Government how many more 16 to 24-year-olds are employed on zero-hour contracts than in 2007.
Thank you. Minister Angela Constance.
Thank you, Presiding Officer.
ONS does not publish information on the number of 16 to 24-year-olds on zero-hours contracts for Scotland. However, last week's labour market figures show yet again that Scotland has lower unemployment and higher employment rates amongst our young people compared to the UK. However, we remain resolute in our efforts to reduce youth unemployment even further. The action we are taking to support young people in employment is making a difference. Our investments in 25,000 modern apprenticeships a year, over 3,000 Community Jobs Scotland placements to date, and a £25 million invested to support employer recruitment incentives across Scotland this year are all contributing to quality job opportunities for young people.
Thank you. Ian Gray.
Well, the Minister will presumably be aware that ONS did report that for the United Kingdom, numbers of 16 to 24-year-olds in zero-hour contracts has doubled since the economic downturn, and it seems unlikely that that increase is not, to some degree at least, reflected here in Scotland. I hope the Minister will agree with me that that kind of unstable, insecure employment, especially for young people, amounts to little more than exploitation. I do understand that employment law is reserved, and I'm not really interested in what could be done if that were to change, but rather what could be done now to address this position. So I would ask the Minister, will our government use their significant power as a purchaser of goods and services to turn down bids which propose to use zero-hour contracts, as recommended last week by the Scotland Institute?
Minister.
Well, let me reassure Mr Gray, in terms of all our endeavours to boost youth employment, what we are seeking is to create substantial and sustainable employment opportunities for young people. And one example of that is our modern apprenticeship programme. And in terms of people who complete the apprenticeship programme, 79% of those people are in full-time employment. Now, I take the point about the issues in relation to zero-hour contracts. And while for some people they will choose to undertake zero-hour contracts because it's the flexibility that they want and need for, depending on their life circumstances. But I also accept that zero-hour contracts are part of a wider problem of underemployment in Scotland, and we know that young people are hit the hardest in terms of unemployment and underemployment. I do take exception to the issue that I think it's highly pertinent to the debate, what we could be doing with employment powers, and I think that would mean that the debate on this very issue would be perhaps a little less theoretical.
Ian Gray.
On that, can I ask then if Ms Constance is saying that the SNP's position is, given control over employment law, they would in fact ban zero-hour contracts, as Mr Miliband, leader of the Labour Party, has committed to do?
No, what I'm saying is that I'm trying to explain, Presiding Officer, what exactly I've said, as opposed to being rather rudely heckled. What I'm saying is it would be more pertinent if this Parliament actually had employment law within its remit, and that is something that I have argued for pretty much all my political life. I think Mr Gray has been rather disingenuous. We will, of course, be laying out in full what we would like to be doing with employment law. But I think it's very important that employment law should be within the providence of this Parliament. And we won't even get the choice or the opportunity to shape employment law how we would wish without that power. And in that sense, Mr Gray's question's rather theoretical, because, let's not put the horse before the cart. Let's have employment law devolved to this Parliament instead of leaving it abandoned to Westminster. But I have no doubts that there are problems with zero-hour contracts, and that they're part of a wider problem to do with underemployment. An issue that this Parliament is indeed, and this Government is very focused on doing what we can to resolve with the powers that we have.
Many thanks. Now, Colin Beattie.
Will the Minister join me in welcoming the fact that youth unemployment has fallen by 27,000 over the past year, remaining lower in Scotland than in the UK, And does she agree that there is evidence that the Scottish Government's action on youth unemployment is having an impact?
Minister.
Presiding Officer, I think in Scotland we have very distinctive policies. I think we have a very distinctive approach and we are having some very positive outcomes. In terms of approach, we have an unremitting focus on tackling youth unemployment, and that's within the Government, across this Parliament. And I would also argue across Scotland, given that Scottish employers are actually more likely to employ young people under 25 than anywhere else in the UK. I do think our policies in terms of our modern apprenticeship programme are leading to sustainable employment and full-time employment at that. I think our policies in terms of paid internships have resulted in very good outcomes for graduates. 70% of the 800 graduates who have participated in government-funded schemes are going into employment, and it's very important that we get more of our graduates into graduate-level employment, because that will help address underemployment, something that we are actually doing now with the limited powers we have.
Thanks so much. Now move to question 17. Hugh Henry.
To ask the Scottish Government for what reason schools continue to report problems in the recruitment of supply teachers.
Presiding Officer, local authorities have historically reported various degrees of difficulty in engaging supply teachers. The degree of difficulty varies, as Mr Henry knows, geographically across Scotland, across a range of secondary subjects, and fluctuates throughout the year. The Scottish Negotiating Committee for Teachers has undertaken 3 surveys over the past 18 months to establish both the level of difficulty and any reasons. These surveys have identified a number of possible issues, including the changes to the salary scale and also the fact that teacher unemployment in Scotland is now lower than anywhere else in the UK. And the Scottish Government is working with partners through the SNCT to identify and implement solutions.
Hugh Henry.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The Cabinet Secretary may refer to historical problems, but it is the case that in recent years the problem has been exacerbated because of the salaries on offer to supply teachers. And the problems exist across Scotland. They are not confined to specific geographic areas. Councils know there's a problem. Teachers know there's a problem, and indeed teachers are refusing to work on the current terms and salaries on offer. So will the Scottish Government provide extra funding to councils to ensure that the present failing arrangement is scrapped and a fairer and more attractive scheme is introduced?
Secretary.
I do accept Mr Henry's point that this is an issue that needs further progress, but there's a complex series of issues. Mr Henry is aware that the salaries for supply teachers, the payment for supply teachers, was agreed as part of the tripartite agreement 2 years ago, and that was accepted by the trade unions. So all parties, all 3 parts of the agreement, accepted these changes. Teacher unemployment is also at its lowest level for a very long time, lowest in these islands. And that means that when Mr Henry shakes his head as if that doesn't matter, of course it matters, because for a long time we've been trying to drive down teacher unemployment, succeeded in doing so, but sometimes in some areas that creates a problem. The third issue in here is that in the present set of discussions, which are ongoing, there is a discussion about the issue of supply. But the local authorities have to prove themselves willing to come to the table along with others to make sure that this is solved. And if Mr Henry has any influence with any local authority education leader, and I believe he does, then I hope he would influence that leader or leaders to make sure that they come to the table to be genuine in their discussions, along with ourselves, as they will do, along with the unions, and then we can get a resolution of this issue. It is very important that we try and take this forward. There are a complex series of reasons. It is not the same in every single place, and we are trying to ensure that those solutions are found.
Thank you. Question 18, Maureen Watt.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the Scottish Government what recent discussions it has had with universities and colleges regarding demand from international students for courses that develop skills for the oil and gas sector.
Cabinet Secretary Mike Wilson.
The oil and gas sector is a hugely important industry for Scotland, and our universities and colleges provide world-class education and training, both in Scotland and internationally. We recently provided £1.7 million to our Energy Skills Scotland funding to support the establishment of an Oil and Gas Academy of Scotland, a collaboration initially between Robert Gordon's University, Aberdeen College, Aberdeen University and Banff Buchan College, to share resources and facilities to ensure maximum provision is available to the oil and gas industry. I am aware, Presiding Officer, of the concerns that have been raised by the principals of the University of Aberdeen, the Robert Gordon University and Aberdeen College on the UK Government's policy on student migration, and the impact of this on their ability to recruit international students to their oil and gas courses. They wrote to me on the matter of the 30th of April. I share their strong concerns, and once again I am taking these up with the Minister for Immigration.
Thank you. Maureen Watt.
I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that very full answer, and I too received that letter and have written to the Immigration Secretary. Given the excellent global reputation that the Minister highlighted that these universities and colleges have in relation to the oil and gas sector, what does he believe can be done with the UK Border Agency to change these wrong-headed rules?
Cabinet Secretary.
Well, the short answer is independence, of course. We need to have control of our migration and immigration policy. That would make sure that we set the policy that was suitable for Scotland, not the policy that was set for other places. Our universities and colleges have a global reputation, but the most important part, apart from their excellence, is to make sure that we have a reputation of welcoming overseas students. And that is the real problem. The way that the UK Government is handling this, it is becoming unwelcoming in that regard, and we are losing students as a result. All university principals and college principals know that. We should be working together to change that, and the only proper way to do it is to have full control of the policy in this Parliament.
Thank you very much, and that concludes portfolio questions on education and lifelong learning. I will now move